The Galactic Dominion had conquered countless worlds, crushing resistance wherever it appeared. Their fleets moved through the galaxy like an unstoppable force, erasing civilizations that dared to defy them. To them, war was a simple process: invade, dominate, and move on. They had done this for centuries, leaving behind nothing but submission or destruction. When their scouts discovered a blue planet called Earth, they barely paid attention. It was another primitive world, another weak species with no real power. But protocol demanded they send a warning, a show of strength to force surrender before the real war began. Their warships appeared near Mars, where a human colony thrived. The colony was young but growing, its people proud to be among the first to claim another planet as their home. They had no warships, no planetary defenses, only research stations and supply hubs. The Dominion's fleet, led by High Commander Excel Vorin, saw this as an easy target. With a single command, the attack began. Energy weapons rained down on Mars, turning buildings into fire and dust. The humans had no way to fight back. Families ran for shelter, alarms blared, and desperate distress signals were sent toward Earth. Within minutes, the colony was gone. The Dominion's ships hovered over the wreckage, scanning for survivors. There were none. Excel Vorin was satisfied. It was a clean strike, an efficient message. He knew that most species would surrender after such a loss. The Dominion had seen it countless times. Fear broke even the strongest warriors. He expected humanity to beg for mercy, to offer their planet in exchange for survival. He did not understand what he had just done. The message reached Earth within hours. Every news channel, every network, every screen across the planet showed the images of Mars burning. Families wept, leaders stood in shock, and the world held its breath. But something different happened, something the Dominion had never encountered before. There was no surrender. There was no fear. There was only anger, the kind of anger that turned into action, the kind that united billions in a single cause. Humanity had fought wars before, had faced extinction, had endured horrors that broke lesser civilizations. They knew what loss felt like, but they also knew how to fight back. The governments of Earth did not hesitate. The United Nations, usually slow to act, immediately declared war. Factories that once built civilian ships were converted overnight into warship assembly lines. Scientists abandoned peaceful research to create weapons capable of tearing apart the Dominion's fleets. Military leaders strategized, studying every weakness they could find. The Dominion had assumed Earth was weak because they had not yet expanded into the stars with warships. But what they failed to understand was that humans had been preparing for war long before they ever left their home planet. They had studied every possible threat. They had built hidden defenses, weapons in orbit, and experimental technologies waiting for the right moment. That moment had come. While governments mobilized their forces, something even more terrifying happened. Humanity itself responded. Every soldier, every pilot, every engineer who had ever served stepped forward. Retired veterans, young recruits, scientists, mechanics, every capable mind and body prepared for battle. Civilians volunteered in numbers too large to count. They built weapons, designed strategies, and studied their enemy. The Dominion had struck first, but they had no idea what they had awakened. Humanity was not just preparing for war. They were preparing for vengeance. Deep in a hidden military base on the dark side of the moon, a team of scientists and tacticians worked tirelessly. They studied the Dominion's attack patterns, their fleet structures, their weaknesses. A plan was forming, one that no alien empire could predict. They would not simply defend themselves. They would strike back in a way that would leave the Dominion shattered. The first warships, built in record time, were unlike anything the Dominion had ever seen. Human technology, combined with desperate innovation, had created something deadly. Stealth ships that could slip past enemy sensors, weapons designed to overload alien shields, armor that could withstand direct energy fire, and above all, tactics that no Dominion commander could counter. Humanity did not fight like other species. They did not rely on brute force. They used deception, strategy, and above all, an unbreakable will to win. As Earth's first war fleet prepared to launch, Dominion spies within the Sol system sent reports back to their leaders. What they read disturbed them. The humans were not panicking. They were not surrendering. They were organizing. They were growing stronger by the hour. The Dominion High Council dismissed these warnings. No species could stand against them, not one as young and inexperienced as humanity. But those spies, the ones who had seen the fires in human eyes, knew the truth. They knew what was coming. The Dominion had made a mistake. They had believed humanity was like all the others, weak, afraid, willing to bow to power. But they had misunderstood something fundamental. Humanity was not just another species. They were something else, something far more dangerous. The attack on Mars had not crushed them. It had only given them a reason to fight. And when humans fought, they did not stop until the enemy was utterly defeated. As the first human warships left orbit, their crews silent with determination, a single message was sent to the Dominion's leaders. It contained only 6 words. You picked the wrong species to fight. The war had just begun, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The cold emptiness of space was silent, but within the darkness, something was moving. Something that should not have existed. The Dominion's war fleets, spread across conquered star systems, had always relied on their advanced sensors to detect enemy movement. They had always known when a species planned to fight back. But this time, something was different. Their scanners, built to track every energy signature, every heat trail, saw nothing. And yet, their outposts were disappearing, one by one. The first to vanish was a supply station orbiting the desolate moon of Corthus 7, a remote Dominion stronghold used to store weapons and fuel for their expanding empire. The station's crew had followed the usual routine: daily scans, status reports, patrols. Nothing had seemed unusual. Then, in the span of a few minutes, everything changed. An alarm blared through the halls as power systems flickered. The commanding officer, a veteran of countless battles, rushed to the control room, expecting to find some minor malfunction. Instead, he found chaos. Their defenses were shutting down, communications were jammed, and no one could understand why. Before he could issue an order, the outer hull of the station cracked open, exposing the crew to the void. Something had torn through it, something invisible, something precise. There was no distress call. No warning, just silence. When Dominion patrols arrived hours later, they found nothing but wreckage. The humans had struck, and they had done so without a trace. In the heart of the Dominion's territory, fear began to spread. Reports flooded in, supply routes destroyed, warships lost without explanation, key installations gone without a fight. No one saw the enemy. No one knew where the attacks were coming from. The Dominion had faced resistance before, but nothing like this. It was not a war of 2 opposing armies meeting in battle. It was a ghost in the darkness, striking with terrifying precision. And the worst part, they could not stop it. High Commander Excel Vorin, the same Dominion leader who had ordered the destruction of Mars, now found himself pacing in frustration. He had underestimated humanity. He had thought them weak. But weakness did not build fleets in mere months. Weakness did not strike without being seen. Weakness did not cause an empire to question its own invincibility. He turned to his advisors, demanding answers. How could a species so primitive create such a threat in so little time? The answer was chilling. Humans were not limited by what should have been possible. When pushed to the edge, they adapted, they innovated, and they fought with a relentless fury that no species had ever seen before. And now, they were coming for him. Earth's fleet, built in record time, was unlike anything the Dominion had ever faced. Their warships were designed not for brute strength, but for efficiency. Stealth plating absorbed detection signals. Advanced propulsion systems allowed for rapid, unpredictable movement, and their weapons, far beyond what the Dominion had expected, were optimized for destruction. They did not follow conventional tactics. Instead of engaging the Dominion in direct battles, they dismantled their power from the shadows. Supply chains, communication hubs, fuel stations, everything the Dominion relied on was vanishing. It was not just a counterattack. It was a message. Humanity was not here to negotiate. They were here to win. The Dominion tried to respond. They reinforced their borders, increased patrols, and sent out fleets to track the human ships. But it was too late. The humans had already infiltrated deep into their territory. Every attempt to counter them ended in failure. Warships meant to intercept the enemy disappeared without a trace. Troop transports sent to defend key planets never arrived. Entire colonies, once vital to the Dominion's rule, fell silent. What the Dominion had believed to be an easy conquest had become their worst nightmare. And yet, they had still not seen the full extent of what humanity was capable of. Then came the first real battle. The Dominion, desperate to stop the invisible enemy, concentrated their forces in the Vulture system, a critical junction that connected several Dominion territories. They believed the humans would target it next, and for the first time since the war began, they were right. But being right did not help them. The battle did not begin with a declaration, nor with the usual formalities of war. It began with the sudden destruction of the Dominion's flagship, a vessel that had never lost a battle before. One moment it was there, commanding the fleet. The next, it was gone, ripped apart in an instant by weapons the Dominion did not even understand. Panic spread through the remaining ships. Their enemies were invisible, unpredictable, and terrifyingly efficient. They fired wildly into the darkness, hoping to hit something, anything. But the humans had already moved. They struck from angles the Dominion never expected, from directions they had not thought possible. And with each attack, another Dominion ship was lost. Within hours, the once mighty fleet was reduced to debris. The few who survived were left drifting, their ships disabled, their systems dead. They sent desperate distress signals back to their homeworlds. The response was silence. The Dominion could not help them. Across the galaxy, species that had once lived in fear of the Dominion now watched with awe. The unstoppable empire, the force that had ruled with absolute power, was faltering. And the ones responsible, a species that had been dismissed as weak, as primitive, as unworthy of notice. The lesson was clear. Humanity was not a species to be underestimated. They were not prey. They were not victims. They were something far worse for the Dominion. They were hunters. And they had just begun. High Commander Giselle Voren stood in his command center, staring at the reports, his hands trembling. This was not how it was supposed to go. This was not how wars were fought. He had seen countless civilizations fall, but never had he seen one rise so quickly. Never had he seen an enemy learn so fast, adapt so completely. He had believed that the destruction of Mars would break them. Instead, it had awakened something unstoppable. And now, as he looked at the empty space where his forces had once stood, he realized a truth more terrifying than any battle. Humanity was not just fighting for survival. They were fighting to end the Dominion. And if they continued at this rate, they would succeed. The retaliation had begun, and nothing in the galaxy could stop it now. The war was no longer about conquest. It was about survival. The Dominion had always believed itself to be unstoppable. It had ruled the stars for centuries, crushing civilizations that resisted and enslaving those that surrendered. No species had ever dared to fight back for long. Until now. The humans had turned the tide of war in ways no one had ever imagined. What had started as an invasion had transformed into a nightmare for the Dominion. Their fleets were being destroyed, their supply lines cut, and their once loyal subjects now whispered of rebellion. Fear, a feeling the Dominion had only ever inflicted upon others, was now spreading through its own ranks like a deadly virus. Entire sectors had gone dark, their outposts and warships vanishing without a trace. The High Command sent distress signals, demanding reports, but the only answers that came were fragmented transmissions of screaming officers, abrupt explosions, and then silence. No one knew how the humans were doing it, and that terrified them more than anything else. On the bridge of the Dominion warship Varkish, Admiral Droven stood with his arms crossed, watching the star map flicker in front of him. Red markers, Dominion fleets, were disappearing one by one. Every attempt to regroup had failed. Every counteroffensive had been a disaster. He clenched his jaw, his mind racing. How had a species so young, so inexperienced in galactic warfare, managed to outmaneuver an empire that had been waging war for generations? The humans fought differently. They did not seek open battles. They struck from the shadows, crippled supply chains, destroyed command centers, and left nothing behind. Dominion soldiers, once arrogant and fearless, now hesitated at their posts. The whispers had begun. The humans were monsters, ghosts that hunted without being seen. There were reports of entire bases wiped out in a single night, with no warning, no survivors. Some said the humans did not even need ships, that they could appear anywhere, anytime, and take what they wanted. It was nonsense, of course. And yet, the fear was real. The fear reached its peak when the Dominion lost contact with the capital of the Sylvani system, one of its most fortified regions. The defenses there were unmatched. Dozens of warships, planetary shields, an entire army stationed on the surface. It was supposed to be impenetrable. And yet, within hours, it was gone. The last message received was a distress call from the planetary governor. "We don't know how they got in. They're inside. Shields are still up. Impossible. The transmission cut off, leaving only static. The Dominion scrambled to make sense of it. The humans had not even attacked with a fleet. They had simply arrived. The system was declared lost, and no one knew how. This was not war. This was something else entirely. On Dominion homeworlds, paranoia took hold. Civilians who had once cheered for their empire now spoke in hushed voices, wondering if they were next. Propaganda channels tried to reassure the public, but the lies were becoming harder to believe. The mighty Dominion, the conqueror of worlds, was being pushed back. One high-ranking official, desperate to maintain control, declared that the humans were only winning because of luck. That same night, he disappeared, his transport destroyed in orbit by an unknown force. No one claimed responsibility, but everyone knew who was behind it. Humanity did not send warnings. They sent messages written in fire and wreckage. High Commander Excel Vorin, the architect of the war against humanity, stood in his war chamber, his sharp claws digging into the metal table before him. His glowing eyes scanned the reports, his breathing heavy. He had underestimated them. He had thought the destruction of Mars would break them. Instead, it had forged them into something unstoppable. He thought back to the early days of the war, when humans had begged for peace, when they had sent diplomats pleading for a truce. He had laughed at them then, believing their weakness was permanent. Now, the laughter had turned to silence. The humans were no longer asking for peace. They were taking vengeance, and there was nothing he could do to stop them. A trembling officer entered the chamber, bowing low before speaking. "High Commander, we have lost another fleet. The defense lines at the Zorkan Expanse have collapsed. There were no survivors." Excel Vorin clenched his fists. "How many ships?" The officer swallowed. 73 warships, sir." Excel Vorin felt something cold settle in his chest. 73 warships, gone in a single strike. It was more than just numbers. It was proof. Proof that the humans were beyond anything the Dominion had ever faced. He turned to his strategists. "Tell me we have a plan." The silence that followed was more damning than any battle report. They had no plan. They had never needed one before. The Dominion had always been the hunter. They had never been the prey. The realization spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Other species, long trapped under Dominion rule, began to hope. If the humans could fight back, perhaps others could too. Rebellions that had been crushed before now found new strength. Insurgents received shipments of human weapons, technology modified for guerrilla warfare. In the shadows of the Dominion's own cities, resistance cells formed, inspired by the unstoppable force that was humanity. The Dominion had ruled through fear, but now that fear belonged to them. Zelvorin knew the war was slipping from his grasp. He had one final option. If the Dominion could not defeat humanity through strength, then they would break their spirit. He ordered the fleet to target Earth itself, to burn it until there was nothing left. But as his forces prepared for the assault, new reports came in. Humanity's fleet was already moving. They were not defending their homeworld. They were going straight for the Dominion's heart. Earth was not the one in danger. His empire was. For the first time in his life, Zelvorin truly understood what it meant to feel fear. The galaxy had never seen a war like this. The Dominion, once the most feared power in the known universe, was on the verge of collapse. Its fleets were burning, its armies retreating, and its rulers drowning in fear. The humans, a species once dismissed as weak and primitive, had turned the tide of war with ruthless efficiency. They had no mercy, no hesitation. Every strike was calculated, every move precise. The Dominion had started this war believing it would be over in weeks, that humanity would fall like all the others. But now, after years of brutal combat, the truth was undeniable. This war had reached its turning point, and humanity was winning. On the bridge of the Dominion's last great warship, Varaktal, High Commander Zelvorin stood frozen, his claws gripping the control panel as he stared at the strategic display. The Dominion's forces had gathered at the last defensive line. The Irathan system, a fortress world surrounded by a vast network of space stations, automated turrets, and elite warships. It was meant to be the last stand, the place where humanity would finally break. But deep inside, he knew the truth. This was not a battle to reclaim victory. This was a desperate attempt to survive. Reports from across the Empire were coming in. Rebellions were spreading like wildfire. Former allies were abandoning them, and even their own generals were beginning to lose faith. The once mighty Dominion was crumbling, and it was all because of the humans. Then the alarms blared. The human fleet had arrived. Thousands of ships, sleek and dark, emerged from hyperspace with perfect coordination. They'd wasted no time. Swarms of smaller attack craft surged forward, weaving through the Dominion's defenses like hunters chasing wounded prey. Explosions erupted across the battlefield as Dominion ships were torn apart before they could even react. The humans fought like no species had ever fought before. They did not engage in traditional formations, did not wait for orders like the Dominion's forces. They adapted, they improvised, and they struck with precision that was almost terrifying. Admiral Droven, one of the last competent leaders in the Dominion's fleet, shouted commands, but it was already too late. The humans had studied their tactics, learned their weaknesses, and now exploited them with brutal efficiency. Every attempt to regroup was met with devastating counterattacks. The Dominion's warships, once symbols of terror, were now nothing more than burning wreckage drifting through space. On the surface of Irathan Prime, General Kalroth watched the battle unfold through the command center's massive holoscreen. He had spent his entire life fighting for the Dominion, crushing countless enemies in its name. But now, for the first time, he felt something he had never experienced before: hopelessness. The human ground forces had landed, breaking through planetary defenses with terrifying speed. Their soldiers fought like demons, moving in perfect synchronization, using weapons that melted through Dominion armor like it was paper. Every counterattack was crushed. Every stronghold fell one after another. There was no stopping them. The city of Karzun, the Dominion's last major stronghold on the planet, had turned into a war zone. Dominion soldiers, once proud and arrogant, were now panicked and desperate. Streets were littered with wreckage, buildings crumbled under relentless bombardment, and the sky was filled with the glow of human dropships descending like angels of death. Civilians screamed, fleeing in terror, but there was nowhere to run. The humans had surrounded the city, sealing every escape route. They had not come for prisoners. They had come to end this war once and for all. As the Dominion's defenses collapsed, Selvorin received a transmission. The screen flickered, and a human face appeared. Admiral Ethan Cole, the man who had led humanity's war effort from the very beginning. His expression was calm, but his eyes burned with cold fury. "This is over," he said simply. "Surrender, and we might let some of you live." Selvorin's claws tightened into a fist. "We will never surrender to your kind," he spat, though his voice lacked the confidence it once held. Cole tilted his head slightly, as if considering his words. "Then you will burn," he replied, and the transmission cut out. Moments later, the final assault began. Human warships broke through the last of the Dominion's defenses, bombarding key military installations with pinpoint accuracy. Elite human soldiers stormed the central command compound, their armor reflecting the fires around them, as they cut down any who resisted. Selvorin fought to the last moment, his personal guards slain before his eyes. And then, the doors to his command chamber burst open. A single human soldier stepped forward, his rifle aimed directly at the High Commander. He did not speak, did not gloat. He simply pulled the trigger. A single shot echoed through the chamber, and with it, the Dominion's reign ended. Across the galaxy, the news spread in an instant. The Dominion was defeated. Its fleets were shattered, its leaders dead, its once great empire reduced to nothing. In the streets of occupied worlds, people celebrated, throwing down the banners of their former rulers. In human-controlled space, there was no celebration, only quiet determination. The war was won, but humanity knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy had learned to fear them, and now they would decide what came next. The turning point had come. Humanity had not just survived. It had conquered. The war was over. The Dominion, once the most powerful empire in the galaxy, was nothing more than ashes scattered across dying worlds. Its fleets had been reduced to wreckage floating in the cold void of space, and its rulers had met their end in the flames of their own arrogance. Humanity, the species that had been underestimated and mocked, had emerged victorious. But victory was only the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead. What would come next? The galaxy had been ruled by fear, oppression, and war for centuries. Now, with the Dominion gone, a new order had to rise. And humanity stood at its center. On Terra Prime, the heart of humanity's new government, the High Council convened in the war chamber. Holographic displays filled the room, showing the countless star systems that had fallen under their control. Some were liberated worlds, grateful for their freedom. Others were broken remnants of the Dominion, their people uncertain whether to fear or follow their new rulers. Admiral Ethan Cole stood at the center of it all, his hands resting on the table as he listened to the reports. Every eye in the room was on him, waiting for his decision. Humanity had fought for survival, for vengeance, but now they had power unlike anything before. Would they become conquerors, ruling with an iron fist like the Dominion? Or would they forge something different? Across the galaxy, the echoes of war had not yet faded. On former Dominion worlds, chaos reigned. Some races welcomed the humans, seeing them as saviors who had freed them from the Dominion's cruelty. Others saw them as nothing more than a new kind of oppressor, an invading force that had replaced one master with another. Rebellion sparked in the outer territories, remnants of the Dominion still refusing to accept defeat. Rogue warlords and surviving Dominion generals gathered whatever forces they could, trying to resist the inevitable. And in the shadows, other alien species watched, waiting to see what humanity would do. Some feared them, some hated them, but all of them understood one thing: humanity was now the dominant force in the galaxy. In the ruined capital of the Dominion, Erethan Prime, the streets were silent. The once mighty city, once filled with the banners and statues of the Dominion's rule, was now a graveyard of broken buildings and shattered monuments. The people, Those who had survived walked in stunned silence as human soldiers patrolled the streets. There was no looting, no unnecessary violence. Humanity did not rule with cruelty. They ruled with precision. Every remaining Dominion officer had been arrested, every key facility secured. The humans were not conquerors in the way the Dominion had been. They did not enslave. They did not destroy for the sake of destruction. But they did not forgive either. Those who had committed atrocities, who had led the Dominion's brutal campaigns, were being hunted down one by one. There would be no mercy. A broadcast was sent across every occupied world, every free planet, every surviving colony. The face of Admiral Cole appeared on screens across the galaxy. His expression was calm, but his words carried the weight of finality. The war is over. The Dominion is no more. You have a choice, to build a new future, or to be buried with the past. There was no grand speech, no false promises of peace without conditions. Humanity had given the galaxy a warning. They had won, and they would not tolerate another war. Those who sought to challenge them would face the same fate as the Dominion. In the halls of power, alien leaders gathered in secret meetings. Some wanted to resist, to unite against this new force before it became too powerful. But deep inside, they knew the truth. Humanity was already too powerful. No fleet, no army, no alliance could stand against them now. The way they fought, the way they adapted, the way they turned every battle into a lesson, had changed the rules of war itself. The only choice was to negotiate, to find a way to exist under this new order. And so, one by one, the surviving factions of the galaxy sent envoys to Terra Prime. They arrived in massive diplomatic ships, entering the towering halls of humanity's new government, where decisions that would shape the future were being made. Some came with humility, willing to accept whatever terms humanity offered. Others came with veiled threats, trying to bargain from a position they no longer held. But none dared to openly challenge the new rulers of the stars. The Galactic Concord was formed, an alliance unlike anything before. Not a republic, not an empire, but a system where humanity held the final word. Those who wished to remain independent were allowed to, so long as they did not threaten the new balance. Those who had once been slaves under the Dominion were granted freedom, their worlds rebuilt under human oversight. Trade routes were reopened, technology shared, but always with one unspoken truth: humanity was in control. On the edges of explored space, deep in the void where no empire had ever dared to expand, human ships were already moving forward. Humanity was not content with ruling. They were explorers, pioneers, builders of something greater than war. While the rest of the galaxy struggled to understand the new order, humanity was already looking beyond the ruins of the Dominion, beyond the fractured alliances and fearful whispers, beyond the stars that had once been unreachable.